Welcome to another episode of the Mind's Eye with Mike Lowry. Guys, again, as always, thank you so much for tuning in. I got my boy by the name of James Perkins on today, and we're talking about men's mental health, given June is men's mental health. So stay tuned. All right, so as we know, June is Men's Mental Health Month, and I wanted to take the time with my boy James to kind of talk about certain things that men struggle with when it comes to mental health. Oftentimes, it's hard for us to be vulnerable. We don't have the right people, the right resources to be vulnerable with. We're judged, we're ridiculed for it. Being the idea of soft is a thing for us as men, so a lot of times we keep things internal until opportunities happen and situations occur, and then we just blow up out of nowhere, and everybody's wondering, what's wrong with him? What happened? Well, my mental health wasn't in order. I didn't really have anybody to be able to speak to or talk to about certain things, to kind of get off my chest, to be okay with, what's going on in my life. And because I'm always asked to do so much, being a man, and not to say that anybody else doesn't have a lot on their plate as well, but it's sometimes as men, it's hard for us to just feel and then, speak about it, publicly. So I got my boy James here to kind of talk a little bit about mental health and how we can, have some best practices and things that we can do to kind of better our mental health as men. So my boy James, tell us a little bit about what you do.
Awesome, man. Yeah, so I am a individual and couples therapist. So I have the privilege of holding space for individuals and couples here in Raleigh. I have a private group practice called Intentional Living Counseling. So I see a good percentage of brothers on a daily basis, and have the privilege of hearing their stories and helping them navigate their next steps, and host a podcast called Brothers in Therapy. We'll be resuming here shortly, but yeah, man, I'm committed to helping brothers that look like us and share our experience.
I appreciate that. I'm glad you're here. So I wanted to ask you a couple questions, just kind of, pick your brain about, some things. So do you understand and identify the importance of mental health? And if you do, why?
Absolutely. I think it's essential to the functioning of your day-to-day living. No other domain of your life is as significant or as important as your mental emotional health.
Right.
Because all the other domains of your life, work, relationships, raising kids, parenting, all of them result, or the proficiency in how well you show up for them is going to be directly tied to your mental emotional health.
Absolutely.
So if that is not stable, it's going to work its way out in how you show up at work. It's going to work out in how you parent, how you show up with your partner.
So with that being said, why do you think that, like, men in particular, why do you feel that, like, we have a hard time, exposing our feelings or being vulnerable? Why is it such a stigma for us, and especially in the Black community?
Yeah. Well, apart from the fact that I think society reinforces men, we are more, we're more firm for our performance. So because we link a lot of our identity around our ability to perform, it can be very challenging to say, hey, I can't perform. I'm struggling to perform. I'm going through these things.
Yeah.
Because people are counting on our performance in a lot of ways. And then also, while people may say, that, especially in the culture, like, hey, we want men to be vulnerable, most people can't handle a man's vulnerability because once he starts to really open up and share what's going on in his world, it can really disarm people, Mike, because it's like, you're going through all of this and you're still showing up.
Right.
So people, especially family, spouses, whoever they may be connected to or responsible for, it can really, in some ways, jeopardize that person's belief that, hey, can this person take care of me? Is this person going to be there? Because if they're navigating all of that, how can they actually show up?
Right. Yeah.
But
we're expected to.
We're expected to. And men are like, this is what we've been doing.
Yeah.
They don't know any other way. So they have to, in a lot of ways, they have to compartmentalize and disconnect in order to be functional.
Right.
Because if they did sit in sometimes all the vulnerability, it could really be overwhelming.
Yeah, I agree. Do you think that mental health for men in particular is a lost cause? Like, do you feel like we're making strides to better our mental health, or do you feel like we're still kind of like we have a long way to go?
I think we're doing way better than we've ever done. I think a big part of that was the pandemic.
Okay.
When everything got shut down, it really helped to, I think, expose people to themselves, because all the ways that you would typically cope were shut down. So you can't go to the club, you can't go to the bar.
Yeah.
You may have still been in bed and get in touch with your weed man or
Yeah.
whatever. But all those sources,
you come through, right?
You come through, right? But for the most part, it's like everybody is locked down.
Yeah.
So now you have to cope with your own internal thoughts. And I think that really served as a catalyst for a lot of men now engaging in therapy. And then because of, I would say, the massive amount of deaths at the hands of, not to make it political, but seeing so many brothers especially killed these last several years has, I think, really reinforced the significance for people to pay attention to men's mental health. Because in some of these cases, these brothers weren't stable. It wasn't that they were criminals. It's like the brother is not well.
Right, yeah.
And y'all can't see that. And now his life is being lost or taken.
Yeah, I think the pandemic for me was like the first start of me finding the way to process, you know, because it allowed me to slow down and really look at life for what it is versus like when things are moving, you're not really like processing, you just knocking the task out and you're really not, you know, doing the work for yourself. But, you know, even now that things are back, you know, in order, I do find moments in time to process.
Yeah.
And that's process my thoughts, process my emotions, process my feelings. And then like I have this thing, I always say this, like I talk to myself. I talk to myself in and out of stuff. And
you're the person that you talk to, you're the most important person that you talk to every day.
Yeah.
Outside of you as a believer, you're a person, a man of faith. Outside of your relationship with God, you're the person that you talk to the most.
Absolutely. Yeah, and sometimes it's funny though, because I don't know if it's me or if it's God sometimes. And so sometimes I just kind of like psych myself up or out, you know, in a particular situation, not to like, you know, get too up or get too down. I always say I don't try to be too logical or too emotional. You know what I mean? I try to find a balance, and usually that helps me with my mental health and now in terms of making decisions or how to respond when a decision is made for me, if you will. And that's definitely helped me a lot. What do you think that how that works for you? Like do you find yourself in like where you talk to yourself? Do you just process things? Do you find somebody to call? Do you pray? Like what works for you?
If you ain't talking to yourself, you're probably dead. You're probably dead. Because everybody has a internal dialogue. And so a big part of, to your question, I have to be intentional. When I'm not intentional about being aware of what I'm thinking, so as I say, you know, we should be like conscious observers of our thoughts rather than critical judges.
There you go.
Because oftentimes people tend to interpret their thoughts as directives. So we think because we're thinking something and feeling something that is true. And because it can feel so real, right? Because some of these feelings are connected to memories, they're connected to real life experiences that we've had. And if you don't have the resources to actually help you filter and process that, you can really end up believing a lot of what you feel and say about yourself is true, even though it may be inaccurate.
Right.
And so one of the great things about talking things out, or having an internal dialogue with yourself and verbalizing it, is you actually get a chance to see what it is that you're thinking. Because one thing to think it right, but when you actually say it out of your mouth, you realize like, man, that sounds so foolish. Like that's a lot. That's like that's not the truth.
You can sing in your head when it come out. It's like nah, that
it's
ain't
like
work.
yes, because literally when you're saying it, it's like I don't really believe that about. I don't really believe that's the person I am.
Mm-hmm.
But when it's in your mind, it feels so real.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So let me ask you a personal question, but not to get too personal. How is your mental health?
It's better on some days
Mm-hmm.
than others.
Okay.
As a consequence of if I have not maintained my rhythms to keep myself grounded.
Mm-hmm.
So if I'm not exercising, for me, nature is really important to me. It helps me to keep grounded.
Yeah.
So if I'm not doing that, if I'm not making time for reflection, if I'm not doing things that replenish me, so I love reading, it's really important to me. It's really a spiritual practice for me to help nourish my own soul. When I'm not doing those things, I'm most often more discouraged. I can find myself being more anxious. I can easily be more susceptible to being in a depressed mood. I can be more self-doubtful. I can distrust myself more often.
Yeah.
All those things happen when I don't maintain my rhythms.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So the other thing for me too is like, I could be the one struggling with mental health, and I think it's important to know who you go to for certain things. Like I was talking to someone the other day, and someone was telling me, I was like, I pray about it, I pray about it, I pray about it. And he was like, that's good, but you need to find one person to talk to that can give you like some dialogue or conversation right now. And I think that's extremely important because a lot of times, oftentimes we find ourselves talking to the wrong person. And then they put you in a worse mental health state than you were before you got there to begin with. So, and then too, like if you're the person that you know that somebody's being vulnerable with you, you have to have some type of discernment and be like, okay, let me not beat this person down as they're already, in this space of feeling. And I think a lot of times people just be like, well, you shouldn't have done that. You should have did this. You just blah, 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 blah. And it just makes them feel a little worse about what they did instead of like trying to encourage them, trying to like help them move forward in the space that they're in. So I think each party has a responsibility when it comes to men's mental health. And that's why a lot of times we do keep things to ourselves because if I do bring it up, somebody's going to use it against me later. Somebody's going to like ridicule me for it. So it's just like, like God's time and our time is different. Therapy don't come to next week. So who can I run to? That's all.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Right.
So what people don't realize is that sometimes like, we're expected to fix it. We're expected to pay for it. We're expected to show up. We're expected to be emotionally available. But like, we need a minute too.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? I think that's important. And for me, getting that minute, like I take time for myself. I never understood that like being alone is important. And that's not like we need people. We want to be around people. We want to have relationships and connect with other people. But I really do think that we should separate and compartmentalize our lives sometimes to really like process the day.
Yeah. Yeah. If you don't, you need as I said, we all need a practice of solitude and silence.
Yeah.
Because there's so much that happens in silence and solitude that doesn't happen when we're talking and when we're engaging with people.
Right. Yeah.
But yeah, we need safe people. There's to your point about the brother saying, just pray about it. There is a part and responsibility that we have. 1 John 1:9 says, if we confess our sins, he's faithful and just to forgive us and cleanse us from all unrighteousness. You go down to James, he says, confess your faults one to another so that you may be healed. So your forgiveness often, most importantly, comes from God, which is vertical. But he says that your healing comes through your sharing. And he uses that word very specifically. He says, confess your faults. He doesn't say sin, because faults has to do with our weaknesses, our frailties, the things that make us vulnerable. So it's just not about the things that we're doing that are not, that are sinful or missing the mark. He says, confess those things to the person that make you feel inadequate. Right. Essentially, that make you feel vulnerable, that make you feel frail, that make you feel compromised. Yeah. And in sharing, your healing is going to come through that exchange. Hopefully, if on the other side of that exchange you have a person, it's the other part that has compassion and empathy. So generally the people that are judging you or assessing you are judging and assessing you out of their lack of own self-compassion for themselves.
Absolutely.
So they can't really give you something that they haven't, they don't possess for themselves. Or it's easier to elevate themselves and feel better about themselves if they call you out for your stuff.
Yeah, I've learned that it's important to know who to tell what, or know what to tell who. You know, you can tell, you know, somebody like you got promoted, you know, the job, but if it's something that you may be dealing with in terms of relationship, that's probably not the person that I would tell. I would probably go to another friend for that.
Yes, everybody's not safe.
Everybody's not safe. Everybody's not for you. And I realized, you know, some of the closest people in my life, and when something hits the fan, you start to see like who people really are.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? And they've been in your life for years. And you know, you just have to use discernment and knowing like who to tell what to, and I think it's extremely important. But I want to ask you this question while I have you here. So given all that's transpired in your life, you know, we deal with mental health, we deal with all different traumas and things. What drove you into therapy to want to help other people with their mental health? Was it like a trauma event for you that pushed you into that space? Or if it was just like your acts of service that you wanted to give to the community?
Two distinct experiences. One, in high school, there was, we had these awards that we would normally give out for 7 awards that they would give out for 7 outstanding seniors. I was a senior, and I had no intention on attending this banquet, but my teacher, who loved to this day, Miss Lynn Lai, she called home. She says, "Hey, you know, does James have any intention on coming to the senior banquet?" She was like, my mom said, "I don't think he has." And she was like, "I don't think he should come. Nothing else. We want to have a banquet. Food is going to be great." I heard food. I was like, "Okay, I'm coming." So I go to the banquet, and the food is great. And midway through the presentation, they start to give these awards. The awards are chosen by both faculty and peers, and they're highlighting different characteristics, different achievements, things that the person has done. And so first four awards, I see other teachers that I know, peers, get their awards. Fifth teacher comes up, Miss Lynn Lai, teacher that I know, and she starts to talk about how this person that they've observed has sat with people during moments of grief, have held space, have been a holding space and offered encouragement. And oftentimes these people would, you know, be walking away either feeling encouraged or you'd be able to see them crying because this person had said something that had been meaningful. And then she says, you know, with the 5th outstanding senior award goes to James Perkins. And I had chocolate cake in my mouth. And I was like, what in the world? So I go up and get my award. And that later that evening when I get back to the house and I'm processing, I realized in that moment that, man, one, my vulnerability wasn't a weakness. And I never thought that those skills were as important as they were. And the fact that I was been highlighting for them in part was the early kind of discernment of me sensing that this is probably a space that the Lord may be calling me to. I wasn't for sure that was the case, but it was an early indicator. Fast forward to college, took a bookkeeping course in senior of high school. I've always loved business and marketing, but I love people. I ended up declaring my major as accounting when I went to North Carolina A&T State Yankee Pride. And I was an accounting major for the first 3 years, and professors were great, but we went to this conference in Atlanta and called the National Association of Black Accountants. Before we even got there, really, because I was a part of this accounting organization, these companies would come in and take us out to eat and kind of show us what we were going to be doing once we got outside into the marketplace. So I'd already started to get this sense of, man, this is probably not going to take me as far with interacting with people in a way that I wanted to. And literally, as I'm having this conversation in myself, we're scheduled to be at this conference in Atlanta. we get their mic, and the first night, the keynote speaker is speaking. And this brother is so passionate that it literally unsettles me.
Oh,
I'm
wow.
like, man, I don't have nearly half as much passion as this dude has.
Yeah.
And what is that going to mean for me? Because I'm like, I'm going to devote my life to this career path, and he sound like he love it. I don't have that.
So think about this real quick. I want to say this. So you're looking at a guy that has this type of passion, and then now you're doing what you're doing. I always say this quote. I don't think nobody has it. This is a Mike Lowry quote. You can become the teacher in the thing you used to struggle with.
And from that point, literally, the craziest part, and I'll show you how that's really important, is that week that I came home to a church I was fellowship on at the time. The pastor was teaching on purpose and passion, and he said, your passion is something that you love so much, where if it came to the point where you had to do it for free,
Yeah.
you would do it. But because you do it so well, people reward you for doing it.
Yeah.
So to ask myself the question in that moment, if it came to the point where you had to do it kind of for free, would you do it? And obviously, because I'm sitting here, the answer was no.
Yeah.
But the thing that jumped in my mind, I didn't know fully what it meant, but the thing that I felt was counseling. And all I can remember, again, was being in the library when I first got to undergraduate, and people would come by for help on homework on the third floor of Buford Library in Greensboro. And before you know it, people were telling their life stories. I'm like, why does this keep happening?
Right. Yeah.
But every time, and then holding space and leaving, I felt like I was swerving in my sweet spot. And I switched my major from accounting to psychology. And at the end of my junior year, it was the most consequential decision, but it is where I'm at now is the benefit of that one decision here almost 20 years later. And I often share that because I say, this is a calling. People ask me like, man, do you get drained doing this? I say, I may get physically exhausted.
Yeah, you're just human. Yeah.
But I feel energized in this work of holding space. In part because I'm not trying to change people, I'm really helping to come along and support people in their journey. I learn so much from my clients.
Yeah.
And helping them navigate their stories.
Yeah. It's like for me, like I'm not a therapist, obviously, but just doing this YouTube channel I feel like it's something that I'm growing into in terms of the space, and something that I feel like I have a gift for, that I'm fine tuning. But it's really to help people and understand perspectives, and understanding like we all come from different walks of lives. We all have traumas. We all have things that we're dealing with, and we all struggle with our mental health at times. And just being able to like talk to people and put resources out there, give people hope, give people a thought process that they can hold on to and moving forward. Because not everybody has access to resources that that you and I may have. You know what I mean? Like some jobs will pay for your therapy. You know what I mean? Some jobs won't. So how do those people, get through from their day to day? Maybe they can hop on something like this and then, help them. That's free. You know what I mean? And so that's part of why I do it. Like, obviously everybody has this monetary aspect of doing certain things, but you really do it for the passion and for the love of people, as your acts of service, of giving back. And that's really why I got into it. And it actually helps. It's like therapy for me. Like it helps me like talk through my thoughts and things that I've struggled with, and understanding, and having other people on is understanding that like we going through similar things, but even though the face of it may look different, it still made us feel a certain way. And I think that a lot of times in our traumas and the things that we deal with, we don't realize a lot of the stuff that we still struggle with today, we forgot. And we just remember how it made us feel. And so talking to somebody and understanding that like something hurt me, let's get to the root of it. Let's talk about it. Whether it may be your homeboy, your homegirl, a therapist, or somebody, you need to identify who that person is to be able to talk to get through that trauma. And I always say that like strength isn't avoidance. It's going through it. And that's how you get the healing. That's how you overcome. That's how you get to the other side of that trauma. Because if you don't do that, it's going to show up in your kids when you're hollering at them, telling them to sit their tail down somewhere. It's going to show up in your new relationships. It's going to show up in your life, and you wondering like, why does everybody keep leaving? It's because you didn't identify that problem.
Yeah.
And you're still holding on to that bad thing that happened to you 20 years ago, and it's affecting your mental health and all your relationships going forward. You know?
Yeah. The less you talk about it, the closer it stays in your soul. The more you talk about it, the more it gets distance from you.
Absolutely. Well, James, one thing, what would you encourage men in terms of mental health before we get out of here? What would be the one thing you would leave men?
You know, I think what is important for men to hear is that you are enough. Is that you are not defined by what you achieve. You are not defined by what you can attain. You are enough. You are affirmed. You are approved. Everything that you need to do, what you need to do in your life, is something that I believe as a personal conviction that you have within you, and it's just a matter of working what's already inside of you out.
Yeah.
But you are enough. I don't think men hear that enough, that you are enough. Like, you don't need to perform for your worth and your value. That is separate. I think you should work out of that sense of self-worth, but not for it. It's right. Work for it. It's the difference to work out of it rather than working for it.
Yeah. For me, I want to leave with the people, like, it's okay to be vulnerable, but it's very important to know who to be vulnerable with. You can't be vulnerable with everybody. That's not going to be effective. Just understanding and knowing who to be vulnerable with. And James, you are enough, brother.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. I appreciate you.
You both.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much. Well, that concludes another episode, The Mind's Eye with Mike Lowry. Guys, thank you so much for tuning in. I really do appreciate your support. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And to my men out there, seek the help that's necessary. It's okay to be vulnerable around the right people, but it's important to take care of your mental health. I'll see you again next time. Peace.